but it changes my view of what human beings are to know that that's what would happen.
Yeah.
That in a dire sudden need of that scale, I wouldn't be alone. I mean, it's absolutely astounding when a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake, a giant landslide, suddenly, or even a fire, suddenly destroys a community. The unbelievably intense communal sharing that occurs, and it doesn't 100% overcome every kind of prejudice, and you still would help your children first. But it's just utterly amazing how the differences break down and it all becomes one incredibly strong communal group. Unbelievable. And it happens in every single case that's ever been studied in every culture. Now, if it's a plague or a famine and it happens slowly, you get no such result at all. In fact, maybe a little bit the opposite. But just know that when the hurricane comes, or there's an accidental explosion that levels your town, you are going to have the most wonderful feeling. And people will try their whole lives to recapture that feeling because it's the most amazing thing they've ever felt.
You're doing this really interesting research now on kama Muta. And what's cool about this is it's not quite a relational model, although you can map it on. It's an emotion. And
well, it's caused by a sudden intensification in communal sharing. That's the only thing that causes it, or as far as we know. And I've looked pretty widely. Yeah. But so it is tightly tied into relational model theory, but that's not how we came upon it. First, we came upon the phenomenon, and then we tried to say, well, what's causing it? And then we looked around and said, oh my gosh, every case is sudden intensification of communal sharing. So muta is actually the Sanskrit word, but it has the same Indo-European root as moved, and it means moved. And kama means in Sanskrit love. So kama Muta means being moved by love. Now, the Sanskrit speakers did not use that phrase. I have made it up. Or maybe somebody did, but if you go looking in the classic texts, you basically can't find that phrase. So that's, we could have called it emotion Z, and that would have been just fine, but it sounds more poetic to call it kama Muta.
What are the paradigmatic sources of kama Muta? Where should we expect to see it, even if we haven't measured it yet?
Well, that's what I wrote a whole book about, looking to see it, saying, I'm going to go look all around the world throughout history and all the sources I can find. And then I also had a bunch of, over the years, undergraduates at UCLA doing participant observation, where I said, here's the emotion, here's what caused it, where are you going to find it? And one said, oh, poetry lounge, And another one said, oh, Alcoholics Anonymous. And another one said, Meals on Wheels. And another one said, Sufi Mosque, right? And then they did 10 weeks of participant observation, each of these students. So they went looking for it and this is one of our most interesting discoveries about this emotion. There are myriad cultural practices that exist in every society that have culturally evolved in order to evoke this, although in order implies a human planning, but these practices would not exist if this emotion didn't exist. And, to make a trivial example, Pixar movies as a company would not exist if this emotion wasn't there, because what they're selling is a guaranteed kama Muta experience.
Can psychedelic drug use stimulate this?
MDMA, yes.
Interesting.
Other drugs, not so much, no. But MDMA itself, well, okay. Some of my undergraduates
I bet
have done participant observation and report to me that the right dose of MDMA, of ecstasy, can evoke this all by itself, but it certainly makes you much more susceptible to kama Muta that you would have felt a bit otherwise. So one thing that evokes kama Muta in most people is certain kinds of music, different kinds of music for different people. So you're at Coachella, which is the great outdoor music festival of California. And people often, people who are sober feel kama muta a lot. But boy, you take ecstasy and those shows make people just in tears and hugging strangers. And Kevin, it's extremely important to understand, you can love the deity of the forest, your children, your partner, absolutely to the limit of love, no kama muta. It's when you suddenly become more aware of that, more focused on that, where that becomes more salient, that you feel kama muta. On the other hand, you can not even know that somebody, a person or an animal exists, and you run into it, and a kindness from somebody can evoke a certain amount of kama muta. So it can start at zero, or it can already be very high. But if it doesn't change suddenly, you don't get kama muta, right? And if you build up slowly an affection for whatever, no kama muta. It's got to be something. Now, it doesn't have to be a change in the world. You can remember when somebody did something, and what you find is that when people tell about kama muta experiences, when they tell about it, it reminds them, and they start feeling kama muta again, and the listeners also. So it doesn't have to be that the world changes or anybody does something, but just thinking about it, making it salient to you. One of the ways we can evoke this easily and reliably, and we use it in experiments, that are videos from YouTube. I mean, there's thousands of them that evoke this, and that they're out there on YouTube because they evoke this. Okay, so some of those I will show a video in my class, or when I'm giving a colloquium on this, to evoke the emotion in the audience, so now they know right away what we're talking about. I've seen these hundreds of times. It still makes me feel good, even though there's zero surprise. So there's a wonderful video. In fact, if you just after we finish talking, Google soldier homecoming compilations, and you find that people have collected these things where the soldier comes home and the girlfriend or the daughter or somebody didn't know they were coming home, or did know they were coming home, right? Yeah. And then the person appears, and you can just see that they're feeling kama muta, but whether they're feeling it or not, you feel kama muta watching it. This has to come from maternal bonding, which is absolutely essential to mammalian survival. If the mom has the babies and doesn't keep them warm and doesn't protect them and doesn't start suckling them, immediately the babies die. Really? I mean, here we get into a deep question, okay?
Yeah.
And I published a paper on this if you want the full academic, heavy-handed spelling out of this, called The Lexical Fallacy in Emotion Research. And basically, I don't believe that any of the words that we have in English or that anybody has in any language are spot on, one for one descriptors of natural kinds. So I don't even think that love is a good word for describing human feelings, let alone apes, okay. Dogs. So people will say, "What, Alan, haven't you ever been in love?" Well, I felt some very strong feelings that I call love, but were all of the times when I felt love the same feeling? And are there other times when I felt something that I never would have called love, but really is? So that's the problem that I have, is that I don't think love is a very valid scientific construct.
All right. Well, Alan, this has been a lot of fun.
I'm moved that you're devoted your time to this.
Oh, well, the time flew by, which is a good sign.